Today we're taking a look at what came out in Judges Guild Installment N from August of 1977. Please stick around. I'm AZ Mountaineer. This is our channel, Old School Rules, where we celebrate the community of old school gamers and grognards who like classic RPGs, miniatures, magazines, and everything that goes with it. Today's video continues our look at the products of Judges Guild and their bi-monthly installments that they sent to subscribers. This installment focuses on the first part of a broad wilderness campaign setting around the city-state of the Invincible Overlord, and it starts with an area they call Wilderlands of High Fantasy. Hope you enjoy the video. I've mentioned before that Judges Guild is one of my favorite companies from the early days of the hobby. They put out some fantastic products. It's been a while since I've gone through one of these videos where we take a look at the various installments, so I'm trying to get back into that that pattern of putting this stuff out there for you guys. So we left off with installment M, and you remember they did their installments every other month for subscribers, and they lettered them. And so this month we're up to installment N. And so again, these are products they put out for judges or referees, or later we call them dungeon masters, to give them ideas and information they could use in their home campaign. A real pioneer of this idea, a recognition that supplements are something that people were glad to pay for, and really were looking forward to having help with being produced by other people. So what did you get in installment N? Again, it came out August 1977. Pretty much Bob Bledsoe's the driving force at this point with the company. As we'll see here, a number of other people contribute information that shows up in the pages of the journal, which is their sort of newspaper at this point. Cost, if you were a subscriber and you wanted to buy it, would be about $5.50. And here's what you would get. Journal N, and that's, at this point, used to be pieces of paper, then bigger pieces of paper, then a few sort of folded like a little booklet. Now we're basically getting a newspaper here that's printed, and it's a total, I think, of 16 pages. You got the Wilderlands of High Fantasy booklet, so that's an 8.5 by 10 size booklet, module sized, basically, right, and stapled. You get a couple of maps, and then there's a note sheet I can't seem to put my hands on, but I'll tell you about it. It's just got a couple of little notes about the relationship with Dungeons and Dragons, or I mean with TSR and the Dungeons and Dragons trademark. So let's take a look first at the stuff we get here at the Judges Guild Journal. As I said, it's printed up here as if you're going to read a newspaper, and unfortunately it's printed on newspaper quality paper, and so it's very thin. Mine's got some tears. It's got these little, puncture holes going down the sides like you would see in old newspapers. But it opens up here like you're reading a newspaper, and very large size, and as I understand it, they went to this because it was, as you might imagine, a fairly economical way to print a lot of material for people. So there's a lot of stuff in here, and we're going to take a look at that first, and then we'll move on to the stuff with the maps and the Wilderlands of High Fantasy. So the first thing we have here on the very first page, this sort of column, if you will, called Jocular Judgments. It's just a little bit of some notes. They talk about the warlord of Barsoom is alive and well, living in Virginia, and they talk about C. Randall Garrett's On the Martian Problem, published in Isaac Asimov's science fiction magazine. And he also says, great news, basic D&D has been published, and we're chomping at the bit to get our hands on advanced Dungeons and Dragons. And they mentioned that you can get that from them as well, obviously from TSR. There are other sort of article here called Shrewd Slants from the Sagacious Sage. It's just some random notes here that they have about different things going on in the hobby and people that are connected to them. They mentioned keep your eyes peeled for more information on the Wilderlands in the next installment, and as we'll say, talk more about it a little bit later, Wilderlands of High Fantasy, this is actually part 1 of 2. Of this new, basically campaign setting that they have. We'll talk more about that when we get to it. And then finally we have a little note here of advice when your players are calling on the gods for aid. You should be really free to limit, maybe the gods ignore them entirely, or they limit what they're willing to do for them. He said you certainly shouldn't just say just because the player asks for some help that they're going to get exactly what they want. Then we have a Scrolls from the Archive article And it's a little explanation about what's gone on in his campaign. He gives you some characters, and he tells you about this story. They're out and basically in these jungle ruins. The guy realizes there's Medusa there, and long story short, he ends up falling down into this pool of water. And before he can turn back around, the Medusas come after him and accidentally looked into the pool, seen her reflection, turned herself to stone. And this magical transformation happens in the area where many other statues, which were previous victims, are unpetrified, and a lot of the sort of evil and the vines and stuff like that begin to fade back, and you see the original city that had been there before. And just an advertisement here, they're selling, because I think Frazetta's awesome, they're selling Frazetta posters as one of the many things Judges Guild will sell you besides these subscriptions. Now, Tips for the Towers is going to tell you about what they have in this subscription, right? It's sort of the editorial page, if you will, or column. He said a bunch of people were asking for campaign maps, and so this time they've given folks 2, and we'll talk about those. He says, and they're printed on both sides, and so on one side there's a judge's map with a lot more detail, and on one side you see map number 2, and on the other side I think you see map number 5. He says you can even get out like colored pencils if you wanted to. You just be careful not to use something with heavy ink because it will soak through the maps. And then there are also a large map that has less details for the players to see, and same map on one side and then the other section on the opposite side. He mentions that this is a hex map system. There's several empty spots in there. If you want to, add more detail, you can of course just write that in as you go. Talks about some people who've sent things in that have been accepted and utilized this time. And he talks about running into Gary Gygax at Gen Con 10. And he talked to him a little bit about some of his questions and ideas around how they did things in the Judges Guild universe. One of those was apparently some people had complained that in his city-state, many of the NPCs had levels in class, sort of like, backgrounds. And people were saying, oh, everyone should be level 0. And he said, no, that's not right. And Gary agrees with me. These people have had adventuring careers potentially before, and it's totally appropriate that they have levels and classes and obviously the skills, the armor, the magic items, etc. that might go with that as well. He says again that they are, they've worked up this written agreement with TSR, and they are an official D&D Play Aid service, and they're going to get more background, more information. One of the things that comes with that, apparently, he makes comments on, are that they now send stuff over to TSR to let them see it before it gets published, and that had caused a little bit of a delay in some of the stuff getting out this particular time. He talks about some of the stuff they're going to have next time, more wilderness campaigns in this to make larger the area that's covered by their maps. They also have a campaign hex product that you can buy. You can buy like sort of this, I don't know if it's 11 by 18 map, basically blank for you to fill in. And you can also get sort of a pad, I think, of hex sheets is something new that they had made available to people. It gives people information about the subscription, how their service works, $12 a year, how you can tell when your subscription is going to come up. Encourages you to go look at the booty list, which is where they list everything that's for sale. So like back issues, if you want to buy Dungeons and Dragons, you can do that through them as well. And they announce one of their exciting new products, which is Dave Arneson's First Fantasy Campaign, which is not something you get through the subscription. You have to buy it standalone. It's like $7.98. Comes with maps and all kinds of information about Dave Arneson's home campaign, Blackmoor. Started a video on that. It's a pretty big video, so I'm still working my way through it, but I'm going to have that to share with you guys here, I hope, pretty soon. Another thing that they mentioned that they've come out with are called Chronicle cards. These are really rare. I recently got a set of these, which I'll maybe throw up on a quick video and show you guys. But basically, they're just these little cards, basically the first player character sheets, right? And they're only that big, and you have information on the front and on the back, but you could keep those at the table and keep as a way to keep notes instead of on a piece of paper. Some other things they have for sale: Traveler game, Frazetta posters, and more information to come for those of you who subscribe. So he's trying to encourage people to do that. He also mentions if you turn in products that they use, it'll give you credit towards subscription. So here's an article in the newspaper, if you will, by Tom Holsinger, who's been in prior editions of the Judges Guild Journal, and he's talking about the detail to include, advice for your home campaign. And here he wants to talk about the magic system and how that plays out. It sort of sounds more like he's talking about wargaming than Dungeons and Dragons. But he talks about, spellcasters and how much damage they can do. And that he thinks it's too much because the spellcaster becomes like this, really powerful, overwhelming part of an army. And so what he proposes is this concept that spellcasters, as he generically calls magic users, can get together, and with 25 total experience levels, they can sort of join together and cast a protection spell. And it basically would stop spells from opposing spellcasters from entering this area. 25 experience levels gets you a 100-yard circle. And you can add more spellcasters, and then that gets bigger. That protected area gets bigger and bigger. So that's one of his big things that he suggests. He talks a little bit about his campaign, the difference between followers and hirelings. Followers, people who will sort of stick with you. Hirelings who are there just for the money, and so they're a little more likely to run away because obviously they don't get any treasure if they get killed. And you probably don't have loyalty to your hirelings necessarily because you can just replace them in town. And the last thing he wants to talk to you about is how much he enjoys creating a background for characters. It's not a high point for me, but he likes to figure out where they've come from, sort of on the world map, what their background is, with what kind of family they came from, and things like that. And then he says, those are good threads you can draw on as you go forward in your campaign, which is fair enough. We have a little note here from Kathy Bledsoe. This is her home campaign, and it's just a little note about some stuff that happened in the last campaign. Now we have The Power by John Cleave. He says, inspired by Michael Moorcock and George Lucas' Star Wars. He says it's sort of like the Force in Star Wars, but he's calling it The Power. And his idea is that there's some mystical force in your campaign universe that can be invoked to encourage the characters, push the characters, maybe give hints to the characters. And some of his ideas even involve making this thing something that sort of can compel the characters. I think it's okay. There's lots of different ways, right, to come up with creative story threads to drive your characters forward. Then we have a letter to the editor with questions, more specific details about Teagle Manor, and he wants to know about the specter and the whites, and the fact that it seems like in one case they're talking, in another case there's a chair that like turns into a white, and like how's that work? And then, can you give me some more information about what these people look like, and how many sort of undead are out there, and how they come to be, and that kind of stuff. And then we have the answer here from Bob Bledsoe. And so he talks about race, and he says in his world they can speak. They don't like to, but they can. They can also be visible sort of as an outline. And I think also he says that whites can actually take on a corporeal form as well. He says if they want to. I always think of whites as something that is physical, race as something that's incorporeal, but that's just me, I guess. He clarifies that this chair that they're talking about in Teagle Manor sort of has an enchantment on it, and so if you leave it alone, it just stays there because it is a white that is polymorphed into a chair, which polymorph is dispelled when you touch it. So there's that. And then he gives his theory on where these different undead come from, like ghouls are created by other ghouls, and whites by killing a white. Anyway, and then the pictures in Teagle Manor, he says, resemble the person as they were in life. But again, ultimately, he says, Teagle Manor, the whole idea is that you personalize it, you make up your own answers to these questions, and it's perfectly fine to change things, to come up with your own answers, to remove things that you don't like in there, etc. All right, then there's this huge section here in the journal, 5-6 pages long, with wilderness encounter system. This is Bledsoe's idea. All right, he loves charts, so we start with this chart. And first you determine where you are across the top. Cities, towns, roads, clear, woods, forest, hills, mountains, aerial encounters, rivers, swamps, etc. So that's the lettering across the top. Then you roll a D100 and you come down the chart to see what type of thing is going to be encountered. Adventurers, officials, tradesmen, domestic animals, giants, undead, enchanted monsters, simians, avians, saurians, insectoids, equines, rodents, and it just goes on and on and on. And for every single one of those, he's got a chart. I'm just going to show you a few of them. So here are like what officials would be. And again, you go across the top to see what type of area you're in your wilderness, and then you roll D100. And the way this chart works, like in the DMG, I think it would say like 01 to 05, right? So here, if you roll that number or less, well, I should say as you go down, if it's above the 1 number and equal to or less than the number here. So like if you're in a city, you roll a 56 or a 55, that'd be a messenger, right? If you rolled a 57 to 61, it'd be a page. 62 to 66, it'd be a reeve, and so on. That's his technique. Here are the true giants, which made me laugh because it starts with pixies and leprechauns, hobbits and kobolds, but anyway, all the way up through titans at the far end. And here I just picked 3 random ones. Here's enchanted monsters: clay golems, iron golems, statues, homunculus, infernal machines, invisible stalkers, juggernauts, afritis, djinnis, elementals, and other. So that's that. And they also have included in there something else you could use, some new monsters. So the first thing they have are these things called carnivorous plants by Greg Jacob. The egophage, so I'm going to tell you about the monsters. 10-inch conical blue mushrooms found in woodland areas. They release spores that are undetectable. If they're inhaled by a member of the party, they will destroy your brain and then take over the body, imitating the deceased in every way, infecting one or more members of the party each day until every member of the party has been infected. No mention of a saving throw. Then they'll find a good place to take root, let the bodies die and decay, and then the mushrooms will grow. So pretty freaking deadly, but actually pretty cool thing. Next we have Jack in the Pulpit. The plant holds a tiny green creature who can move and attack up to 6 inches high. Will use a tiny dagger, doing 1 to 8 points of damage. They love to cause mischief and have a 75% success rate with such devices as falling tree limbs. They can also use illusions as a 4th level illusionist, and they will come after the party until they leave their forest. Next we have the Pebble Mold. Found in dank dungeons, it has a main body buried 2 feet under the floor with 1 to 100 appendages that have grown out of it. They give the appearance of strewn pebbles, but actually the pebble is just a bud and it has acid in it. When you pass over the main body, all the pebbles squirt their acid on you and they do 1 to 3 points of damage. I don't know if that's total or each. The acid will dissolve flesh and metal. The dissolved particles are absorbed through the buds and feed the main body. You have to dig up and get to the main body to kill the creature. Each pebble takes 3 hit points before it dies, but it will regrow. The pebbles will be brownish in color, 2 inches in diameter. That's pretty cool. The pitcher plant. These plants grow in large potholes and disguise themselves to look like normal landscape. They can charm any level with a 5% chance per level of breaking the charm. The plant waits for the victim to fall in and uses the charm. It then digests the victim after sealing him in. That's pretty good. So my newspaper was ripped right there. This is called the Rage Eater. It feeds off the rage or pain. It's not sonically endowed. A brown and slimy mold roosts on ceilings, under doorways, or in places of activity. They strike by falling on people passing under them and begin to produce a berserker rage. If others are in the party, the stricken person will attack the other people. If alone, they will feel intense pain and potentially suffer insanity. The snapdragon. These plants have flowers about the size of a man's fist. Some can breathe fire like a mature red dragon. That seems like a lot. The smaller blooms will bite and do 1 to 4 points of damage. 1 to 10 flowers per stalk. That might seem a little intense. The spider vine prefers to live in trees overhanging roads and trails. When a creature walks under it, the plant releases 5 to 30 vines that snarl the victim and drain 1 to 3 hit points per melee round. If 10 or more are still on the victim in 5 melee rounds, strangulation will begin, doing 1 to 6 additional points of damage per round. That's pretty tough, but these are pretty cool. The Spinifex bush is 2/3 shrub, 1/3 trunk, with a huge gnarly root curled about it. On the ground you can see 5 main roots. It stands about 3 feet tall. It needs a little bit more than it can get from the ground, so it snares prey with huge roots that grow 10 per turn for 40 feet and are flexible. The plant waits, the victim falls asleep or stops to rest, and then it attacks. 2 of the roots are used to snare the person, the 3rd is used to paralyze the victim after snaring, and the 4th will draw nutrients out of the prey, and the 5th feeds the victim, keeping him alive for 1 to 20 days before it ultimately will kill him. That's okay. And the sundew plant disguises itself as part of the terrain. When the creature walks over it, the rim spores shoot a spray of adhesive, like a web spell. After gluing the victim down, it dissolves only animal flesh, 1 to 2 hit points per turn, about 10 feet in diameter, anywhere over 50 degrees. The touch-me-not is found in temperate climates. These plants have pods that burst when touched. 1 to 30 buds will pop and release spores. The explosion does 1 to 6 hit points, and the victim must get cured disease within 12 days, or they take root in the lungs and you die. And finally, the Venus flytrap. We all know what that is. There'll be 1 to 3 traps growing on each plant. 15% chance that the plant has 1 to 6 additional fly traps. The traps are 3 to 6 feet. The plant waits until the victim is within 10 feet to strike. 30% chance more than 1 trap will hit the victim. Each trap can do 1 to 10 hit points of damage. 10% chance to decapitate you. And then once you are caught in the plant, it will digest you for 2 to 6 hit points per melee round until you are completely dissolved. So a whole bunch of carnivorous plants. Some of those better than others, but all pretty interesting. Then we have Marvelous Monsters by Dennis Waltman. The Kronk looks like an adult red dragon, but it is not carnivorous. Normally it leaves you alone unless you get around its young, and then it attacks. The Rabantlers is a rabbit with antlers. Usually the pet of a leprechaun. If you treat it nice, it may tell you where the leprechauns keep its treasure. They blink like a blink dog 3 times per day. Brown Molt, a fox-like creature with bat-like wings and 4 legs. Intelligence of a rat. The breath weapon is lightning, and they like to eat gray oozes. The Silver Molt looks like a brown molt, but it is twice as big, and they're smart as a dwarf, whatever that means, and has fire as a breath weapon, and it likes to eat ochre jellies and black puddings. The Slime Worm, I think it looks like an earthworm, but it's the size of a boa constrictor. It's not quite what it said, because it said it resembles an earthworm-sized boa constrictor, which would make it look like a snake and be this big. But I think it's supposed to be look like an earthworm and be like, 12, 15 feet long. It likes to eat green slimes and yellow molds. I really like these 3 creatures that go together that like to eat the slimes and stuff that live in the dungeon. That's a pretty clever idea. I've never come up with before, never heard anybody else come up with before. The slime worm does not like fire, but it is immune to the attacks of green slimes and yellow molds. Blunt weapons will not damage it. They're also immune to cold and paralyzation. And then they put their eggs in a corpse in case something will come along and find it and eat the eggs, and then the eggs will hatch inside of the creature's body and infest it and kill it and live off of it. If the dead thing does then get sucked up by a pudding, the eggs will go dormant, but will stay alive until the pudding is killed, and then they can grow. I like this little interconnectedness here. If they get eaten by a silver molt, they will kill the molt. They will poison it and cause it to die. So, and molts somehow know this, and so they will hunt and try to kill slime worms. Good stuff. And then we have the Libet, which is like a goblin with wings, and they usually serve gargoyles. That's okay. Phil Bence has even more monsters. The Demon Warrior is all black, has a black sword, red eyes, and it can sneak up on you, and has a special ability that can cause any light source to go out. The Knight is a relative of a carrion crawler, but they're the size of a rat, and they've got little things on the front that'll paralyze you at a minus. You get a +4 on your saving throw to avoid the paralyzation. We have Trogs. There's some comment here about the charts, which make me feel like maybe there's a chart missing in one of the original books or something. But anyway, Trogs are 7 feet tall, covered in hair, have tusks that curve all the way up to their forehead, and usually attack with swords. They like to eat men. Okay. More monsters. Wayne Patton. Gremlins. Gremlins 2 feet tall, and they're mischievous. And they basically say they'll sneak in and follow the party around, and they'll cause all kinds of negative effects on your to hit rolls, saving throws, cause things to break, and generally cause mischief. And one more monster here by John Chalupsky. This is the Typhonagator, a huge beast that floats over bodies of water, mistaken for a storm cloud or a squall. Sharp eyes may spot its proboscis and its mole-like limbs. They filter, they cause a typhoon, and then they feed when they cause this typhoon, then they suck out the fish and eat them. But they may also damage boats. Here's a little one-off thing called Scholarly Scrolls. And they say, here's an example of a homemade scroll I've given out at the game, and it's got like a drawing of a demon and some words. And basically they say, if you use read languages and you read it, what happens is, in reading it, you release a demon which will immediately attack the party. That's a clever little trap if you want to think of it that way. Here's a brief history of Judges Guild from Bob Bledsoe. And so he says, in August of '74, I played my first D&D game, judged by a guy named Mark Summerlot. I was introduced to Mark and Bill Owen by my cousin, David Petrowski. And David and his brother Mike had become increasingly interested in miniatures and were introduced to Bill through his ad in a Wargamer Digest. Fascinated by the pulp era of science fiction, and developed many a game of science fiction for David, Mike, and my brother Bill, myself, we whiled away the hours in the 1950s. We were avid fans of S&T, I think, Strategy and Tactics, vacillated between buying board games and playing World War II miniature games, sci-fi games. And he goes through all the different types of games that they played. And so 1 week after the first D&D game, I began to judge a campaign based on Tolkien's Middle-earth. We held many open discussions on the rules, developed different variants, during the course of play, and had our own, own rules, own way to play out the things that weren't covered by the rules. The number of players in my campaign mushroomed, and our play became much more sophisticated as we experimented with the combat system and other ideas. And while I still had an active interest in board games, I found most of my spare time, 3 to 5 nights a week, were used playing D&D, not to mention the hours of prep I had to go through for each session. The sessions became longer. Thanks to my insomnia, I didn't really have much of an impact on my life. But even insomniacs have to sleep some. And when my 6 p.m. to dawn sessions became the rule rather than exception, I proposed to Bill Owen, who was an accomplished wizard in my game, that maybe we needed a second judge. And other campaigns developed with different rules, and Bill showed a real finesse in his own judging. General Electric closed its plant in December 1975. I found myself with more time to devote to being the supreme adjudicator of my Middle-earth campaign. And I had a long discussion with Bill and Mark Summerlot, in which I proposed Mark's printing, Bill's layout skills, and my experience as a designer would equip us for a venture in the wargaming field. And then new rule sets were being published, repeating material developed as much as 14 months in advance by a group, and I felt that the reams of material we developed from countless hours of generation and playtesting was valuable to new judges, and I was interested in the exchange of rule sets that was being developed by 1,000 judges around the U.S. Others felt the venture was risky at the time, and I have to admit they were right. I saw how quickly I had saved up $4,800 and that went quickly after GE closed its doors. I decided to try again in April 1976 on a less ambitious scale. One of the new campaigns entailed the huge city-state map, and I hoped it would satisfy the needs of a burgeoning ranks of judges. Mark opted out again, but Bill expressed interest and proposed that we take a trip to Lake Geneva. Bill had developed a very excellent set of Civil War miniature rules he wanted to interest TSR in publishing for him. We went to Lake Geneva in July 1976, overwhelmed with the bulk of our rules and maps and about Middle-earth and the city-state. The good folks gave us encouragement with the upcoming convention. Bill said, let's get the city-state map published or printed. Gen Con was our launching pad, and due to a terrific response there, I turned over my notebooks and maps to the company. The partnership wasn't really in full operation until December 1977. Our first employee, Norma Bledsoe, was paid the same month. In January, I began to work full-time while continuing full-time on my engineering degree. My sister Debbie began working for the company on a part-time basis in April, and Bill began working full-time in March. Most of the material we had used and continued to use was developed in the early days of continual role play and play testing. We feel we owe our existence to the many thousands of players and judges in the fantasy role-playing field. It is our purpose to provide integrity, value, and service at the lowest possible cost within the bounds of reasonable quality. It took thousands of hours of preparation to reach this stage, and Bill and I can maintain this policy by our diligent efforts and devotion to the new concept in the wargaming hobby. Interesting they call it wargaming still, right? We continue to judge and test every idea that is conceived or submitted. Our greatest thrills come from the enthusiastic comments of players and customers. Bob Bledsoe. And I'll tell you, I just wanted to read that all because I think it's really interesting. At this point, I think the stuff that they're turning out is fantastic. I get comments in some of my videos from people who used it back in the day and from people who are still using it today in new campaigns, and I think that's absolutely right. This stuff is so good, you could really only own your Dungeons & Dragons books and the early Judges Guild material, and you would have the start of a fantastic campaign that could run for years. This stuff is really, really rich and really well done. Some of the quality in Judges Guild does not hold, for the next 5 years, but at this point, they're still turning out some of the best stuff you could really ever see. Okay, charts. Bob loves charts, right? So here's a whole new set of charts. This is Dungeon Encounter Matrix, and this is done by a guy named Richard Mueller. So he says, you've got a dungeon, right? Is it sort of lawful, neutral, or chaotic in nature? And remember, at this point, D&D, you only have the 3 alignments. So for each level, you roll a d6, and then it tells you which table to go to find the monsters for each of your rooms. So let's just say we're on level 2, or we've rolled to go to level 2 with our for a monster list. And now we're going to roll a d1000 from 1 to 1000. So 3 rolls of your d10, right? And here is what you put into the room. Anything from peasant alchemists, animal trainers, apprentices, armorers, masons, spies, knights, beggars, friars, nuns, ghouls, skeletons, zombies, kobolds, hobgoblins, leprechauns, chimpanzees, orangutans, gray oozes, monks. And he's got these interesting things he talks about here. Initiate, first circle druid, trickster, illusionist. I think he's using the name that goes with the level. Giant toads, lizards, snakes, giant spiders, scorpions, 1 to 100 spiders, slugs, ticks, fawns, mules, badgers, bats, rats. He's got all this stuff. All right, so that's just second level. A lot of random items down there. Here's a 15th level. Lich, Storm Giant, Lord Colonel Fighter, Master Bard Red, Lord Colonel, Paladin, Wizard of the Sphere, Magic User, the 6th Kolchak Reporter, Mentor of Stone, Inventor, Statue, 2 Balrogs, Thought Eater, Purple Worm, Giant Snails, Brain Moles, or Other. And under the Other list we have Potion Master Alchemist, 2 Large Remoras, Black Priestess Witch. Now let's go to level 20. That's the highest level here, and I'll get myself out of the way so you guys can see me. Lich, Master Bard Indigo, Lord Godling Paladin, Wizard of the Light, Magic User, the 1st Kolchak Reporter, a Statue, Orcus, the Demon Prince, Platinum Dragon, Mithril Dragon, or Other. And then we go to the other list. We've got Master Bard, purple, white, bronze, silver, gold, Wizard of the World, Wizard of the Universe, Mentor of Gas, Mentor of Powder, down, all the way down. That which is not named, I don't know what that is, Lord Master Alchemist, Lord of the Philosopher's Stone, or various gods. All kinds of choices. But it just gives you this idea of how, you know, people utilized charts back in the day. Okay. Then there's a small article here in the newspaper for the Judges Guild t-shirt. And then they're selling some miniatures from Dirk Kliegerspel's Fantastiques line, Heritage Models, Fantasy Figurines, and some other miniature-related items. And then they have their very own booty list. And here you'll see they're up to, this takes us all the way up to item number 48. And it's one of the things, right, with Judges Guild, the booty list gets bigger and bigger over time. And so when you get an item and you look at their booty list or their list of items for sale, it gives you sort of some understanding of where you are chronologically in the history of the company. We have a couple of comics here in the newspaper, in the Judges Guild Journal. This one's called Star Boars. You get this little cartoon here where the C-3PO guy's complaining about flies. And then another one where he gets taken for a ride in a land speeder, and he says we must be getting closer to town. We're hitting more people. So, okay. There's also some interesting art. This art I thought was just fantastic. I can't really tell what the name is down here. It looks like maybe Guild DEA. That's probably not right. But I thought the art here, this particular piece of art was really, really good. And then we've got a not quite so good guy here, caveman or whatever, with a club, spiked club, and this little mermaid creature. And now we're going to talk about Wilderlands of High Fantasy. This is the booklet is the first, I'll call it expansion campaign, take you beyond the city-state of the invincible overlord. It is a 16-page booklet. This is the first printing. And there'll be a second one that comes in the next installment. They also then did a second printing of this, which put them together as a 32-page booklet. So you could get both at the same time, together with all the maps that went with this installment and next installment. Really cool art here on the front. This says Mohow, and the same thing. It's either like Gildia or Gibdia, I don't know. But in any event, really, really nice art, I think, here on the front. So here is the beginning of the overall campaign world. And you see the map number 1 in the middle. We got that already. And that little circle, that's where the city-state of the invincible overlord is. And so we're going to get map 2, which are the Barbarian Altanus campaign map. And then we're going to get map 3, which is the Valley of the Ancients campaign map. Next time, with the next installment, you'll get maps 4 and 5, the second part. And so you can see here he's beginning to build out this campaign world. There'll be more and more maps as we move forward through time, where you could play your campaign. All right, so let's talk about what is in the Wilderlands of High Fantasy. This campaign book is not the kind of thing like you would get today. It is some maps, the hex system, and then a lot of charts really to tell you how to fill that in randomly. So you have this really cool art up here at the top, and then you begin to have these charts down at the bottom. So let's take a look. Just like we sort of had in the journal, there's like a primary chart and then the secondary charts, and you work way through them. So first we've got ruins. Roll for the class, the condition, the covering, the state, and the keeper in the subtitles. So first we roll a d10. What type of ruins what do we have here? Ruins, relics, remains, vestiges, remnants, refuse, wrecks, skeletons, antiques, or artifacts. Okay. And then go down to the next row. If you had ruins, right, and then you go and you roll a d6. Is it the ruins of a manor, a village, a city, a citadel, a castle, or a temple? All right. If it's a manor, go the next one over, roll d6. Was that manor a hut, a hovel, a hall, a villa, a cottage, or a palace? Okay, and you can see for the ruins, you go across here to the right, and there's a d6 to get more specificity. If you rolled on the original d10 instead of ruins relics, Then there's another row, and you get the same sort of roll forward to get more specificity. So it really is for the judge who appreciates having charts to help him or her figure this stuff out. And it's a fantastic tool. I mean, imagine the work that went into putting this stuff together, right? To really help spark your creativity. So I've got a relic, you know, there's tombs, it's a crypt, whatever. You roll your D6s and you get your answers. Now, once we figure out what that is, let's come back up here and talk about condition. Partially covered, fully covered, above ground, rocky slopes, inside a cavern, in a crevice, beneath an overhang, a large crater, partially sunken or charred and burnt. What's covering this? Roll a D10. Sand, ashes, cinders, earth, thicket, mold, slime, rocks, webs, or vines. What state is it in? Roll a D10. Crumbled and decayed, disfigured and defaced, worm-eaten, crystallized and petrified, corroded and eroded, collapsed and tumbled, moldy and contaminated, dangerous, operational, partially operational, fully operational. And what type of keeper? I guess that's sort of the who's in charge here, right? It's some mechanical thing, which is sort of sci-fi. To me, it makes me think of it being more of a sci-fi. Some giant types, dragon types, undead types, lycanthropes, true giants, animals, insects, traps, or none. And here you'll see again, different charts you would go across to roll and just get all kinds of inspiration is really what I think this is about. It has all this laid out for you, or thought out for you to give you a starting point. Fantastic stuff. And of course, you know, I would roll, I'd probably look at it and say, no, I'm going to pick number 2. I got a 6, but I'll take 2, right, on this. But if you wanted to fill out your maps like this, you absolutely could, and that's what this campaign setting is designed to do. It's here's your maps, and here's charts to help you fill this stuff out. Okay. Then they talk about, what about caves and layers? So first they have this idea, you know, when you roll something, if it's in its lair, put it in its lair. Otherwise, obviously, put it somewhere near its lair, right? What type of caves do we have? Limestone caves, talus, sea caves, lava tubes, geothermal caves, stream cut caves, fold and fault caves, ice caves, abandoned mine shafts. And they talk about, you know, the true reality of limestone caves are formed by underground movement of water or dripping of water from the top down through layers of the earth. These talus caves are the settling and erosion of the talus, large rock piles. Sea caves are formed by wave action, lava tubes by lava and magma movement that causes a hollow tube. Geothermal caves, which are caused by the escape of hot steam and water. Stream cut caves, stream like this. Fold and faults by the movement of the earth. Ice caves are inside of glaciers, and abandoned mine shafts are old mine shafts. Then it says, find the grouping that most closely fits the monster type encountered. Roll 1d6 to determine their lair. They've got troglobites, burrowers, migratory creatures, underwater creatures, airborne creatures, and animals. Okay. And so now we're going to go to get the judge's map. Remember, there's a judge's map with more detail, and then there's a player's map, which just basically has the outline without very much in there, except for maybe a major city. All right, so here are our maps. These are really, really nice. They're sort of like a really heavy stock paper. Be careful so these things are 50 years old. So here's my map, right? And we've got the barbarian Altanus on one side. You flip it over on the back, and you've got the Valley of the Ancients map on there. You can kind of get a sense of the size, right? And there's lots of great detail. And there are all these hexes, and the hexes have little tiny numbers, real light in them. So if you had them, at the table, you could figure out what they were. So here on the Barbarian Altanus Campaign Map 2, they give you, on these hex numbers, here are some cities, population, sort of what type of people live there, elves, half-elves, orcs, gnolls, etc. A civilization number, a general alignment of the community, who the ruler is, and what type of resources they have. So that's for your major cities. Maybe, I don't know, maybe major is not the right word, but for your cities. And then the next thing down here at the bottom, your ruins and relics. And so here on these various hexes are ruins for you to go look up. And again, you can use those charts if you wanted. But like, so one of them, just looking here, is the charred remnants of an eroded bridge. And then there are goblins there, it says. All right, so here's our map. Really cool. You can just, I think even though this is pulled out, you can kind of see there's all kinds of detail in here. This is an area, remember, there's lots of water because this is sort of some peninsula that we're seeing. So I'm just going to show you some zoom in of it. The different quarters. This is basically 1/4 of each map, right? Just to show you the detail. Whoops, here's this one. And then the second quarter. The third one. And the fourth. I just think these maps are fantastic. You could sell this today. You're not going to get higher quality work product than what we've got here. You might get more detail. That wasn't the way Bledsoe did these things. And out here at the side, you got the Isles of Ethereal Bells, whatever that is. Worth exploring, right? Just really cool stuff. The Cape of No Return, the Midnight Goddess Hills, cool stuff. All right. Then we have the same thing for the other map. He gives you this is the Valley of the Ancients map, or the Glowworm Steppes. Part of that is also called. And you have the major cities. And then you have the relics, some castles, citadels that are out there. Here's this map, and again, show you the detail. The bottom left quadrant, sort of like the southwest, is water. And then this big empty area here are the Glowworm Steppes, the bottom right side of the map. So it's like, I sort of think of it as like being, I don't know if it's grassland or desert land, but it's just big, wide open, not much there at all. So here's the top left corner of the map. We've got the Plain of Skulls right there in the middle. That's really cool. The River of Grief. Awesome stuff. We get over here on the top right side, we get the Valley of the Ancients, and that's going to go on off, I think, the side of the map. You know, there's all kinds of cool stuff there's got to be, right, to go and explore in a place called the Valley of the Ancients. Here's the Glowworm Steppes. I always love a sort of desert wilderness adventure like that. And then down here we've just got this area that's nothing but water. Okay, so we've got all that stuff, which is the main guts of this book, but then he just gives you some more random stuff. So hey, what's keen sighting? How far can I see? Oh, I got a chart for that, and I got a rule for that, says Bob Bledsoe. The range of unobstructed sight possible should be varied according to creature. A man of normal height is assumed to be your observer. 5 miles per foot of height if you're 1 to 10 feet off the ground. An additional 2 miles can be seen for every foot from 11 to 50 feet up into the air, and an additional 1 mile for every foot taller than that, assuming you are unobstructed. The probability to see details is equal to 2% times your height in feet of the detail. And then a bonus probability is given for details within 1,000 feet of your observer, within 100 feet plus 50, within 200 feet plus 45%, within 300 feet plus 40%, etc. Down to 1,000 feet, you get plus 5. There is a 10% per mile discernment penalty after the first mile. He goes, thus the viewer looking at a 20-foot wide or big dragon at 15 miles away would basically only see a dot on the horizon with no ability or chance to see any detail. Obstructions impair your sight, and then down here he's got open sea, packed desert, dunes, hills, forest, heavy forest, mountains, jungles, and plains, steppes, and how that would affect how much you can see. That's the, I mean, he's the guy, he loved charts. So it reminds me of Gary Gygax, right? Because Gary was all into having charts for stuff, at least when he got to advanced D&D. Hydrographic terrain on the maps for the Wilderlands, right? Only major streams, rivers, and lakes are printed on your campaign maps. Other terrain is certainly possible to be encountered when you're prospecting in one of these little hexes. And then you can roll to see what you find. Rivulets, streamlets, brooks, runlets, streams, rivers, or something unusual. And then you make them narrower and wider, and he's got charts to roll for all that kind of stuff. Does it get narrower in this area? Does it get wider, deeper, shallower? Is it blocked? Are there rapids, you know? And he's got a chart, again, for all that kind of stuff. He also has a little thing in the booklet if you want to go prospecting, you know, for gold, silver, copper. And you can inspect a hex on the map. He says it requires 1 week to look. And then you have this chance that you can find something. And if you find something, you know, there's a chart to see what you found. Was it a trace or a vein or a seam or like the mother lode? You know, what kind of stuff did you find in there, and what was it? You know, how much quality was it? Was it just you know, minerals like gold or silver? Was it semi-precious stuff? Did you find some type of mithril, adamantium, gems maybe? You know, and he's got, again, charts you roll for all this stuff. How big are the rocks you're finding in there? He's got it all charted out for you. Okay, and then the back cover has this map sort of zoomed in to show you the city-state of the Invincible Overlord. And then if you can see here, there's just like one hex, right? The big outline is one hex. And then inside of that one big hex are all these little tiny hexes. And you can get really down into the detail with numbered sections and give more detail for your characters to look at. All right. And I mentioned there was this this one-page thing in here, additional notes, and basically just talks about the relationship they have with TSR and how they've worked out their deal with TSR, that they're going to help them look at their products, and they think that's obviously really great. And they think TSR, of course, is putting out great products. They also talk about SPI, who puts out strategy and tactics, and their numbering system, which is sort of what he used, or hex numbering system, which he used in the maps that he's developed. And at the bottom half of this is just a little bit of a booty list. Okay, so that is our look at Judges Guild Installment N. I think their products are just fantastic. Judges Guild is a great company, put out fantastic products in the early days of D&D, and really had an impact on all the kind of stuff we see today, supplements and adventure modules and stuff like that, that people were not doing really in a material way before they came along. And they showed that you could really make a company out of it. And there's some great history about that I've talked about in other videos. You can get great information from the Assayum website, which I'll mention down in my comment section. The book, you know, I can't remember that Bill Owen wrote this book that I have and I mentioned, which will be in the comments, that talks a little bit about it. Great resources out there for this fantastic company. I hope you guys are enjoying today's video. I hope you're enjoying the series on Judges Guild, and I hope you're subscribed. If you have friends who might be interested, please send them our way. Hopefully they will be subscribers as well. And we'll continue to do these Judges Guild products as I work my way through my entire catalog of the products they put out over the course of 5 or 6 years. Hope you guys are having a great day. Until next time, my friends, keep rolling 20s.